right, and now it's time for episode 11 of True Crime by yours truly, Julie Miller and Ryan Bassoff. Kick it off, gentlemen and lady.
First of all, could you say my last name again? Could you do that?
Bassoff?
It's Besaw, buddy. It's not Basaw.
Buddy, I'm from the
Probably
West.
just
Bassoff.
like
Okay.
sophisticated. Sound like you're not like
Besaw.
Yeah, like it's like a bumblebee and a saw. You know.
no, but
Just-
saw is much
just-
better. It's like the
It's
thing that I spent
it's
$100
more
to feed my cat.
sophisticated.
Oh, it's more sophisticated.
Oh,
Okay, well, let's do a little update on Julio Urias, the pile of garbage that used to pitch for the Dodgers.
I just say his last name always reminds me of urethras or some kind of urinalysis or something like that.
Well,
And
it's
uresis sounds like a health condition. I think it might be. And
Urias.
so ureus is a thing. So anyway, I think he makes me think about kidney stones, for example.
Okay, Julio
he-
kidney stones coming at you.
oh.
Yeah.
All right. Urias, as you know, he's been. I think he's on administrative leave, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Unpaid.
My research department clarified that for me. So earlier this week, Urias' locker was removed from the Dodgers clubhouse. Dave Roberts, manager of the Dodgers, characterizes move as organizational decision. Two stadium murals have been removed, covered up, as well as no signs of any of his merch in any of the team's stores. So the Dodgers are pretty much like erasing this dude's existence, and for good reason. Roberts called the situation, quote, sad on every level. When asked if the moves indicated the team moving on from Urias, he said, I think so. I think that's kind of where we're at right now. So Julio Urias, good day to you from LA. Don't come back. Hit the road, Julio.
Bye-bye.
It's not Jack, it's hit the road, Julio. Good day to you, sir. Bon voyage. I hope you enjoy prison. If that's where you're going, which is likely where he's going to go.
What?
What's that?
Nothing.
Okay, so that's our first update for the true crime for tonight. Our second update, little touchy subject here. The NCAA D1 board chair and vice chair said Tuesday that violent and possibly criminal threats have been directed at committee members in the wake of a high-profile decision denying immediate eligibility for UNC wide receiver Tez Walker. What do you think about that?
No one cared when Amber Heard was like, oh, somebody on social media said that they were going to put my baby in a microwave, because nobody gives a fuck, because it's just something on social media. Okay? So, same here.
Dang.
Oh, threats. We're ruining this guy's life for no fucking reason, and we have a terrible system. But this is a problem because we're getting death threats. You know what? Maybe just nobody cares.
Can we just add that he's transferred from 2 schools?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
But you know
Listen.
the story about the reason why he transferred.
Oh, well,
If this guy was a quarterback, they would have granted it in
Yeah.
less than 24 hours.
probably,
Or
yes.
if he had
Because he's a receiver going to UNC instead of Alabama or Georgia.
Or Florida, something like that, you know.
Illinois had a guy that transferred from Georgia to Illinois. Nobody transferred from Georgia to Illinois. Okay, so get that first off, because his dad was dying and they still denied him eligibility. Like, this is the problem with the whole process, is there's no rhyme or reason anything unless it's going to a school that happens to be my alma mater if I'm the one looking this over, or if I'm a quarterback. Those are the only two stipulations.
And I think you can get some kind of waiver, but like there's favoritism that usually goes with people who can afford good counsel or something like that. But I know with Tex Walker, I believe at his first school, he saw his coach that he saw as a father figure that he really bonded with die on the field of a heart attack in front of his very eyes, and he was really traumatized by that. So then at his second,
Goodness.
so at his second team, he was there with Deion Sanders, and he really bonded with him. And so when Deion Sanders left, he's been having some mental health concerns, but it exaggerated by seeing someone he cared about a lot die in front of his face. And then he wanted to follow Deion to Colorado because he really identifies with him. And so like and he's citing like mental health concerns because I guess he was feeling and Colorado has better mental health services for their students.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was the thing. So anyway, when you kind of consider his reasoning, it's a lot because that's a lot happening, but it kind of hits different than if he just felt like, oh, I'm just going to go to Colorado. It's like, no, like he was like severely traumatized at his first school, so it makes sense why he left that one because he wasn't able to get over his coach's death in front of his face of a heart attack, very sudden. So then he went to another one, and then anyway. So I mean, when you kind of consider it like that, they sound like real assholes, you know?
Yeah, I understand. So yeah, that's that one. Like Julie said, who gives a shit? Why do you need to bring that to the light?
Yeah, I'm sure you get it for all the other bullshit that you do at your job too.
Yeah.
Like this can't be the first time.
All right, let's move on to our next true crime topic of the night. Many of us 90s babies and 2000 kids remember the great convict of Adam Pac-Man Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's back at it again. No longer in the NFL.
Say he played football too. Did you know that?
Yeah, in between his stints in the county hotel.
Not prison leagues either. He's actually pretty.
Yeah, he wasn't in the California Penal League. He actually played in the NFL. In between his stints in the county hotel, he actually played football. Now that he's not playing football, haven't heard his name for a while, and I think that kind of hurt his feelings. So he had to become known again. And on Monday, Mr. Pac-Man, he at a Cincinnati, Kentucky International Airport, he was booked on misdemeanor counts of alcohol intoxication, disorderly conduct, and threatening in a way that's frowned upon at airports these days.
Well, ever since
you can probably guess.
Ever since
The reason there's kind of a reason why we never forget a certain day that happened earlier this week. Yeah,
God.
he was taking that route, I guess, in his alcoholic tirade.
Wow, this week of all weeks, huh?
Yeah, I guess on Monday of all days.
What a dick!
Unbelievable. Yeah. So he was later released. Some things never change for Pac-Man. I guess the red ghost got him and he regenerated again. So.
Took a while this time, but he's there.
Yeah. So that's our Pac-Man update. Now for the big old piece of the day. Or well, it's night now, but the big old piece comes out of Houston. Well, technically out of New York City. Oh boy. Let's see how I can word this without being upsetting to the algorithms. I already went over it. Word salad coming at you. Here we go. So Houston Rockets guard Kevin Porter Jr. was charged with I don't even know. He was charged with beating up his girlfriend. He was laying hands on his girlfriend in a New York City hotel. He was arrested Monday after allegedly attacking his girlfriend at a New York City hotel, according to NYPD. He allegedly attacked his girlfriend, leaving her with a fractured neck vertebrae and a deep cut above her right eye. He is charged with felony beatdown and grabbing of the neck in connection to the incident early Monday at the Millennium Hilton. Prosecutors say he didn't stop the beating until his girlfriend, former WNBA player, I think her name's Kirst Gondrezick, yeah, never got really pronunciation on that, ran out into the hall covered in her own inside liquids.
That are red.
Yeah, that are red. She was covered in ketchup. Porter was, yeah, he covered her in ketchup. Yeah, she found out she was filled with ketchup. Porter was ordered to post $75,000 cash or obtain a $100,000 bond to secure his release. He should not have passed go or collected $200 on that one. He was also ordered to stay away from her. Allegedly, Porter has a history of laying hands on her, including when he rammed his car into hers. So he's been violent multiple times against her. I guess this time he had to get colored the hard way.
And as a WNBA player, I just imagine that she's probably really tall and probably fairly athletic. Just goes to show that. I mean, like, he certainly did.
I would say
out of most women, she would probably like be one of the harder ones to bring down, and yet it happen to anybody. But an interesting pick.
Yeah, I also read that she's an actress and a model. The Rockets released a statement saying, "We are in the process of gathering information surrounding the matter involving Kevin Porter Jr. We have no further comment at this time." Surprise, surprise, right? Say just enough to make it seem like we care, but not enough to seem like we want to know.
I'm sure actively involved in figuring out what's going on. They just don't want to say anything. I'm sure because most teams are pretty involved with the investigation process when things like this happen. They just don't want to catch any shade for saying the wrong thing. I'm sure they are looking into it to save their own asses and PR. But no, I don't think that they are like actively concerned about the girl or anything.
No, probably not. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? The report states Porter Jr. punched her repeatedly in the face with a closed fist. I don't know how you punch without a closed fist, causing an inches-long gash above her right eye, bruising, and substantial pain to her face. Hospital tests show a fracture to one of her vertebrae in her neck. Sir decided to grip her neck in a way that isn't well liked by her body. Yeah, there's a fine line between erotic things and actually trying to unalive someone.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
But and if he ever restricted the air of any female relative, prior partners, that is also as big a warning flag as if he did it to you. So keep your eyes out for that one in particular.
Yep. Caleb, what do you think? You wanna weigh in on this 2-piece combo he gave his woman?
Must say, let him fry.
Let him fry?
Let him fry, dude.
All right.
Put him in this.
He gave her a 2-piece combo with a side of ketchup.
What the heck? Yeah, so speaking
them within prisons, like
Yeah.
Huh?
And hopefully he finds that out at some point. And I know he's not in prison right now. He mailed, sure he posted bail and all that jazz, which is completely BS. It's only 75 grand. It's like insane.
Oh, but he was told to stay away from her though, so
Oh well. Oh,
that's gonna hurt his feelings even more. Than
he was probably also told as a kid never to hit a woman.
he was
So
also told as a kid, probably keep your hands to yourself, right?
you know,
Keep your hands to home, sir.
crazy. We have people killing each other. So we're told not to. It's just insane.
I know. It's just
Can't figure it out.
how do
Thank
people
you.
just
To the prison hierarchy, because men who are more likely, or men who have victimized either a child or a woman in a multitude of ways, is more likely to face repercussions in a more street justice type way.
As they should.
Yeah, so that's just to make that abundantly clear. Yeah, so this week we will be taking one more hiatus from the true crime segment where we're following all the current football cases to going back in history yet again, because we also have a Ted Bundy segment, the final one for now. So we'll be discussing the case of Fred Lane, who is no longer with us. He may be like one of the less known players who was taken out by his partner, but certainly not a clear-cut situation and really intriguing forensically. So he always kind of resonates with me, and it's a sign that just because you're a woman does not mean that you cannot can't use that word.
Julie.
So I'm gonna have Dove cut this part out. Anyway, that just she's a woman doesn't mean that she can't cause great harm to her significant other. So that's kind of a misconception that can exist sometimes. So if anything, Deidre Lane really proves to us that that's not the case. So Fred Lane was murdered on June 6, 2000 by his estranged wife, Deidre, and the 24-year-old was found in the doorway of the family's home deceased after his wife called 911. She ended up going to jail for the crime, but not for very long. So that's kind of a point of contention to this day. So Fred Lane, he went to Lane University in Jackson, Tennessee. He set a lot of school records that still exist today as a lead rusher. So then he was an undrafted free agent for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was there for a couple years. He was actually traded to the Colts in 2000, and he was able to go to training camp, but he never got to go because he died first. He also had a lot of rushing yard and touchdown records for the Jacksonville Jaguars, some of which still exist today. So certainly he definitely left his imprint on football, but not in the way that he should have because he died so soon. But so a little bit about Fred at home. He was a father of 4, one of which he was the bonus parent for. And his youngest daughter, Pilar, was actually 7 days old when he passed. He had 2 other daughters, Regina and Sable, but we don't know a whole lot about them. And then he also had a stepson, Grant, who was his Deidre's son from another man. And he got married at just 22, which feels so incredibly young to me. Imagine like committing your life to someone so young. Anyway, Fred was kind of a controversial guy on the field. So that's why he ended up getting traded anyway. He missed a chartered flight to Dallas for a game, and so the management benched him. He was definitely a man before his time because one time he didn't want to stand up for the national anthem, so that upset a lot of people. And he also had very brazen touchdown dances. So kind of imagine the ones that Marshawn Lynch was well known for. It had the NFL clutching their pearls, for sure, because he was clutching something else. So when he got punished for it, they would always put him on, like, special teams. So, like, that was, like, their punishment to him was, like, okay, 3 weeks of special teams for grabbing your family jewels kind of situation. So, he's, like, well, part of the reason that I was doing it is because they were yelling the N-word at me in the crowd. But, you know, that's a whole other thing. And we're also talking about 1998. So people only cared about what he was doing and not the crowd. So he was naive and he was really immature. And so just kind of considering that, being a father of 4, being a married man, like, that's a lot of things happening. And sort of that contributed to some Mary Jane use that he had. He had a misdemeanor charge for possession of the Schmied. And he went to jail, and it was the same jail that Ray Caruth went to. Like, the guy who also took out his significant other. Maybe we'll get to that sometime. So, I mean, he was a deeply flawed man, but no one deserves the ultimate sacrifice for that. So the day of the crime is kind of unclear, and obviously we can't hear from Fred, so we kind of have family and teammates, forensics to speak for him. But Deidre Lane called 911. She told the operator that minutes after her husband arrived home, she had shot him in self-defense because he was restricting her airway, laying hands on her, and yelling things like their newborn daughter was not his. Deidre was hysterical and crying during the call. She said she shot him once in the stomach or chest and then once again in the body. She said she asked for somebody to come. They everywhere, including on herself, red stuff. And she wasn't sure if her husband was still breathing. She hadn't gone near him to find out. But she was actually nursing her 7-day-old baby with red stuff on her body. I am really struggling with imagining that. So she actually took her husband out with a weapon when her daughter was in the home. And I have a hard time with that. But anyway, her mother was living with her and her son was living with her, but they weren't at the home, so that was a positive. So she spent several hours providing a voluntary statement to the police, and actually she looked pretty guilty from the start because she had to turn herself in shortly after and was released on a $100,000 bond. So they were kind of onto her already because the forensics didn't really match up with the event. And sometimes that can happen because there's a lot going on in a really short period of time. But in this case, it was extra because it was just too inconsistent. So she said Fred came in and she shot him minutes after his arrival. However, his keys were still in the door. His bags were still at the front door, and his body was at the front door. So it really doesn't look like he probably had been in the home for several minutes and done all the things that she had said that he did, because he was literally like walking in the door in the doorway. So she used a 12-gauge firearm of the shot and then the shot firearm variety. And so she was right. She did first get him in the stomach area. But she said that she was so afraid of him that she shot him again. But the thing is that, because apparently he had gotten up, she was really nervous. But the thing is that her first shot, we won't go too much in the details here, but he wouldn't have been able to get up. He would have been unconscious and out within seconds. And I am not doing good with the red stuff. He is unconscious and was unable to get up by a second. So she did not discharge the firearm a second time for self-defense. And based on the forensics, she had actually stood over his prone body, meaning he was stomach down, laying flat on the ground, and discharged a firearm right into the back of his skull. So that's the kind of women is. So it was actually in the third season of Snapped. So if you can find the earlier seasons of Snapped, definitely worth the look. They said she's acting in self-defense. It's battered wife syndrome. And so, of course, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, like, people didn't have a really clear concept about the battered wife syndrome like we do now, but I don't think that modern time would have helped at all. So they were actually, the DAs were seeking a first-degree murder conviction and the death penalty. And the other side wanted manslaughter. So, and then kind of like going back and forth here, there's an argument supporting Deidre's claims. They said she had a marriage full of physical and emotional trauma. She was always afraid, all that good stuff. So, and apparently Fred had a history of physical behaviors. A friend of theirs saw him lift her by the throat and propel her into a sink. She testified in court, so hopefully, like, you generally think that somebody has actually seen it. She was even acting it out. It was kind of a lot. Then she said that she also saw Fred enter the room with his wife into their bedroom, and he had a firearm in his waistband after they had an argument in his pants waistband. So, also, Deidre said when she was 9 months pregnant with Pilar that he had used her head as a battering ram, split her lip, and initiated an unplanned trip down the stairs that she was not prepared for. Nobody witnessed that, but the neighbors did see him grab his wife by the arm when she tried to get into her car. So some of the things are seen, some are kind of not. Allegedly, he would say things like she would never leave him. He threatened her if she told anybody that those kind of things. And apparently people had seen him argue and verbally attack Deidre. Deidre did file a domestic complaint in March of 2000 saying that her husband ripped a necklace off her neck and she fell, but she didn't press charges, and later she said it didn't happen at all. So, and that he hadn't been violent with her, so it's kind of unclear. An OBGYN, because she was pregnant, testified that Deidre had told her that she had physically and emotionally been hurt. And she wanted to be induced early so that she could give birth to the child before Fred could get back home between training camp and the season. And the family claimed that when Fred held his newborn daughter a week before his death, he said the baby didn't look like him. And so, like, that was his thing. He was, like, shouting in the hospital, like, this baby don't look like me. So there's that. And Deidre's mom said that her face was all swollen, but it's not documented by police or the hospital or anything like that. So kind of a lot of he said, she said. And then looking at it from the other angle, so the couple was estranged and Fred was about to divorce her ass. So Deidre was about to lose, like, her money bags. So, you know, and the fame that kind of comes with having an NFL husband, although not that famous because y'all didn't know who Fred Lane was. But anyway, so Fred was coming back to North Carolina to sell a motorcycle and not to reconcile with her. And he actually paid for his ticket to come back, which is interesting, and arranged his transportation to the home. So it seems like she might have thought it was reconciliation. However, if you think about it, Fred Lane was actually broke enough that he had to sell his motorcycle because Deidre was hiding the money, and Fred was making $600,000 a year, but he didn't have any access to his funds. He was so poor that he often couldn't afford to fly home, and his teammates would actually loan him the $155 to fly home from where he was, you know, playing football to back in Tennessee. So, which is interesting because why did she want to pay for him this time? I mean, it kind of makes you do a little side eye here. And then 2 weeks before Fred died, Deidre had actually, in an argument, had discharged a firearm into the wall of the couple's home. So, although she didn't apparently shoot in her husband's direction, according to Fred's dad, but still was the catalyst for their separation and also like a warning sign, definitely. Also, Deidre, she was involved in a bank heist, and Fred knew some of the court details that no one else did, and so they were saying that maybe she was trying to silence him. Also, Deidre had life insurance claim set up for a policy set up for him 30 to 45 days prior to his untimely death. And so it's a $5 million life insurance policy. And so they're suggesting that that might have been intentional timing. Some people said that Fred was the victim, not the perpetrator. Again, this is late 90s, early 2000s. So, and we were still hashing these kind of details out with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. So clearly we haven't gotten everywhere that far. But anyway, he would show up with scratches all over his face. And Deidre was actually telling Fred things like if she couldn't have him, no one could. So it kind of was like, did he actually say those things to her, or was she like projecting? Kind of hard to tell. A store clerk reported that Deidre had asked them questions about the spray patterns and ammunition of the particular firearm that she selected 16 days before Fred died. Yeah, she had gone to, I believe it was like Walmart or like Kmart or something like that, and had asked a store clerk extra details about the murder weapon. Fred's dad said that he didn't have substance abuse problems, even though he had the little Schmied issue, and he hadn't laid hands on Deidre. And he didn't appreciate the implications. An OBGYN that saw Deidre prior to her baby's birth testified that, if you recall, that he said he used her head like a battering ram, he threw her down the stairs, and he split her lip. And so she was going to the doctor all the time during this time. And so when she showed up, she only had a split lip. There was no other signs of physical symptoms, and that late into a pregnancy could easily end it because if you're thrown down the stairs. So maybe she was using the same makeup as Amber Heard. I don't know. And the judge sentenced Deidre to the maximum sentence allowed, claiming that Deidre's actions were deliberate and premeditated, and that she acted maliciously, targeting her husband a second time when he was already rendered helpless. And a little bit about Deidre, kind of a really interesting little side segment here. She came from a super rich family, and she was spoiled. So they had a whirlwind romance. They got married really fast. She didn't need his money because her parents had plenty for her, but she did enjoy spending it. She actually showed up to one of his games with $20,000 in cash in her purse. And even though she had money on lock, she still did a bank heist where they attempt to do a bank larceny, and she had to go to federal court for it. Her and her best friend tried to steal over $41,000. So it kind of goes to show that she's willing to do things for money even when it's not required, because she already has access. So after less than 6 years, she was released. And then she was back in the headlines again because they discovered she was working with another convicted killer who took out her child. And they were running a child camp for a university. So the people at the university actually advocated for her, said she was great, whatever. So they reassigned her, and her murder friend to administrative work at the university. So they wouldn't even fire them. So kind of interesting. As a little side note, help is available. We have been talking about some really tough topics. You can speak with someone today. The National DV Hotline, you can text START, START, to 88788 or call 800-799-7233. But what do y'all think? Was Deidre a battered wife reacting in fear? Was Fred the victim, or were they both victims? What are y'all thinking about this situation?
Spoiled brat.
Bro, what the heck?
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a
lot
word,
to take in.
that's a word salad, right? Of just craziness.
Yeah. As a woman, and knowing just how common DV is, I always want to believe the victim, although I think accountability is really important. But I definitely was leaning towards believing Deidre, and because I think that's important. But then when you really look into what's going on, it sounds awful. Okay, he grabbed her by the throat. He threatened her. He pushed her around. You know, he had a firearm in his waistband during arguments. It all sounds really, really bad. So, okay, so he snapped because he thought that their daughter wasn't his. Like, it was sort of a catalyst. He was taking all his money. He was really stressed out from financial problems. Like, maybe he just reacted, right? But then when you look at the forensics and sort of it was really when she went to the store clerk and was asking specifics about her firearm that did it for me.
That and the life insurance policy.
Yeah, and the life
always a telltale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they were able to take it from a capital murder trial to just manslaughter because she had really good defense. She was rich, so there was that.
Green stuff gets whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. The judge was furious that she only got the sentence that she did, and I generally trust judges. They see a lot of people, a lot of cases. They sometimes get it wrong. We know that, but he seemed really outraged by her, and I can empathize because how would he have had time to get into the home for several minutes, and then be shot in the doorway with his bag still outside with his key in the door? It sounds to everyone like he paid for him to come back because he can't even access his own money. So she paid his plane flight to come back. He comes back inside, and the second that he tries to, see his daughter, see his wife, she takes him out at the front door and then stands over his prone body and discharges the firearm in the back of his head, even though he absolutely didn't need to. She didn't need to. He was already going to go from the first one. So that one just always sticks in my head. I researched one years ago, but
double tap.
If she paid for his plane ticket to come back, then she would know when he's supposed to be coming home. So it shouldn't have been like
yeah.
She knew when he was going to be home or around about the time. So why would she think anything else?
Yeah, and why did she pay for that trip but not all the other trips?
Right. And why doesn't he have access to it? He's making it. That's fucked up.
Apparently in certain bank accounts had transferred it around. So that's why he came back to sell his motorcycle, because he couldn't afford anything. And it's just weird to me. And I'm not a mother except for my cat. I was my nephew's legal guardian for some time. But what I don't really understand is she was so terrified, then she calls the cops, but somehow in between discharging the firearm twice into her husband, including standing over the back of his head, she somehow gets her daughter. The fact that she did all of these things with her daughter, like a 12-gauge firearm, and takes him out and then gets her, even though she's covered in his bodily red fluids, and starts breastfeeding her while she's on the phone. Like, she had to go to a completely different room, bring the crying baby to her, and start doing that, covered in his fluids, and is on the phone, but is distressed. And I know that mothers may react in a certain way when they hear their baby crying, and that can kind of elicit a response. But it's been so coordinated, and like more put together than the average person would be after something that scary. And it's just really disturbing, the visual, I think, of like her having so cold-heartedly, it appears, allegedly, and taking her husband's life, and then like beating his daughter over his body as she's calling the cops. It's a lot. I don't know. If she wasn't that upset, that would make it a whole lot easier. I'm just gonna say that. But
Hear that?
yeah. My heart is with Fred Wayne and his family, and I know that. His stepson loved him, and he had 2 daughters. We don't know that much about them, but they lost their dad. And then his 4th daughter, she was raised by Isra and her family, and she thinks that her dad is this terrible person. And she's in college now, beautiful, doing really well. But it's just really unfortunate. So I hope someday she sees the evidence and is able to consider that. But I mean, it really makes you think about who was actually the victim, and it's really tragic. He was only 24 at the time, had this career ahead of him, and he was just young, and maybe he made some bad decisions here and there, but certainly nothing that was worth the death sentence. So, yeah, yep, he lives rent free in my head sometimes. Some of the stories stick with me just a little bit more. So, on that lovely note, in the video that's happening right here,
Mary's own daughters.
I actually visited Ted Bundy's family home as he was growing up. Another little tidbit. I won't be releasing the address, although it is publicly available. They have had a lot of trouble with people like trying to break into their home and like trying to get all these different things. So not what I did not even get out of the car, roll the window down, nothing. So it's kind of like a little drive-by. If you try to look up their address on Google Maps, it is like completely blurred out because it's protected to some extent. I personally don't understand someone that would even want to go to live in this house. Like, that thing should have been knocked down, because if y'all know what Ted Bundy did to his sisters when he was a kid, there's some evil in that house. Okay, so I don't know why you wouldn't just knock that thing down. But somebody who was, and I'm not super invested in the paranormal, but somebody that was fixing the house in between when his family moved out and the next family moved in, said that they had some really weird stuff happen in between there. And I just think that there is a lot of evil energy in there, and so you wouldn't be able to get me within any closer than I already was to this place. Okay, no thank you. Ew. And then I was like, he had, I believe, 4 siblings, and this house is small. Just another fun fact. I was like, wow, like, I know that his dad, I believe he was in the military, and his mom was a single mom who remarried, and so I'm aware that they didn't have all the money in the world, but definitely a small house, very innocuous, like a totally normal neighborhood. Looks like every other neighborhood in the area, like very nice, cozy area. So it was just a really weird thing to have it just kind of there, and to know all the things. I found that to be also the case when I was at I believe it's called the Jade Plaza now, the law school that he went to. They look like regular buildings. They're like regular houses or, places of business, and it's like, ew. Like, people don't even know, like, there's a guy walking by with this kid on his shoulders. He was piggyback riding his daughter around. It was really cute, but like right past Ted Bundy's growing up house, and it was just like, yuck. I don't know. The whole thing gave me the ick. He gives me the ick. But I was in the neighborhood. I thought I would share with my true crime fans who can't actually go. And it's not like you can see the house online. And so just kind of did a little quick passing by because I was so intrigued. Yeah, but just a weirdly quiet little house that I would have knocked that thing over. Okay, like they're talking about the Kohlberger where he did the Idaho 4 murders. Like that house is gonna get knocked down soon. They have to keep around for the forensics. But I would have knocked down that other house too. I'm like, what is the story on all the houses? Like, ew, gross. No thanks. So that is the end to our little Ted Bundy segment. Maybe. You never know when I'm going to drop another fun fact. I am frustrated because I don't think that they should have killed him. One, because I don't appreciate an electrical chair that like literally puts people in flames. Old Sparky, Big Sparky, whatever. It would actually light people on fire because it was always malfunctioning. So like, no thanks. That's not ethical. They said a death sentence, not a torture sentence. Gross. And then also, like they're like, we did all the tests we possibly could to see like what was wrong with him and all that. And it's like, no, you didn't, because y'all didn't even know in 1995 or whenever it was, like half the things that we know psychologically now. So if we had kept him around, we could still be like getting more information now that we have more knowledge. So like, I'm just one of those people who's like, let's just keep them in a cell. It's cheaper anyway because he was always trying to get out. So like the appeals were like monumental. Just keep him in there and like ask him questions all the time. And the more we know, like we could have done brain scans. They're like, we did brain scans, but they didn't know what to look out for back then, like we do now. So I'm generally frustrated by that entire situation. And I even have heard that if he had been tried in Florida appropriately, they had one of the things that sealed his fate was bite marks on his last victim, Kimberly Leach, who is 12 years old. He bit her at some point in taking her life, and they had taken impressions of the bite, and then they had taken impressions of his mouth, and he had a gap here, and so there were special dentists for this where they would like analyze to see if the marks matched up. But we know now that this is like totally fake science and that there's no actual evidence that you can consistently identify someone by their teeth marks, and that you could easily get the wrong person, or like you could tie someone to a crime with completely different teeth than what actually happened. So that was one of the deciding factors. Now, of course, if it happened today, we would know that was fake, but that we would have DNA, so he would still be in the slammer. But there was some question as to like the accuracy of the evidence that they had at the time. So I think that's really intriguing because it doesn't seem 100% ethical either, although at the time they did think that bite evidence counted. Anyway, just a little something for people to think about when it comes to Ted. And enjoy his family home. Yep. Any final thoughts? Carter said fry him when he heard that he went after a 12-year-old. So I think y'all might agree with him on that.
What'd you say?
What?
Ryan, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I said true crime has been absolutely insane this week.
It has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it was. I'm gonna find the quote because it was just so good. Yeah, but life is stranger than true life is stranger than fiction often. Yeah, John Wayne Gacy, also a famous serial killer, the guy who dressed up like the clown. He said, "The dead won't bother you; it's the living you got to worry about." And that's just, So did you hear him say it? So anyway, yeah, I think that's true, and I think our little true crime segment was very much representative of that today.
Yeah, it was a good week.
Yeah.
Like,
All right.
yeah, It was a good week, but bad for other people.
Yep, and we will continue this fun train heading into next week, and we will be back to try to keep track of all of the football player shenanigans that are happening right now. I will be, Ryan will continue to follow the all the other sports that he's actively watching, which there are, as you know, several cases that we discussed this week, and there could be more. So yeah, so next week we will leave history behind us for now and try to get back onto our roster of crimes that happen ever so frequently. All right, well, don't forget to comment, like, and hit the comment, like, subscribe to, and then hit the little notification bell so that you always know when we're uploading something new.